Raymond Ash was 46 years old, a man who understood floors, how they were built, what they were built on, and what it cost when someone who didn't know the difference between a subfloor and a finished surface tried to tell you the subfloor didn't matter. He had been in the building trade since 17 and had spent 18 years developing commercial real estate from the ground up, and he had never once stopped wearing the kind of boots that showed you had been on a site. On a Wednesday evening in September, he arrived at the preview reception for his newest commercial development. He had been on 3 other sites that day and had not gone home to change. He came through the service entrance he knew well because he had approved the door placement in the second floor plans. A group of commercial brokers near the lobby's east wall looked at him as he came in. One of them said something. The others laughed. He noted it the way he noted everything. He kept walking. He walked to the front of the room where the podium was, where the event director was waiting for him. He was the developer. He was the one opening the evening. The floor they were standing on, the lobby floor, pale limestone with a specific inlaid border at the perimeter, was one he had installed himself the previous week with a crew of 4, because the flooring subcontractor had run 3 days behind, and Raymond had not wanted to delay the event. He had been on his knees on that floor for 2 days. To every seam of it. They were still laughing when he reached the podium. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The site was dark when Raymond Ash arrived at 5:38 in the morning, and the darkness was information. A well-run development site had a specific quality of readiness in its early dark, the materials staging organized, the safety rigging properly positioned, the kind of order that told you what the crew's discipline was before a single person arrived. He walked the perimeter first always. He had done this on 42 projects. He still did it on everyone. Raymond had started his working life at 17, installing hardwood floors with his father's 2-man operation, working weekends and summers, learning first to prep a subfloor correctly and then to lay the finished surface on top of it. His father had told him early that most people who complained about a floor were complaining about the top. The problem was almost always underneath, that the visible work was only as good as the invisible work it was sitting on. Raymond had taken this as trade instruction and had eventually understood it as everything else. He had worked his way from flooring to finished carpentry to general contracting to project management, and at 31 had bought his first piece of commercial land with a business partner and built a 4-unit retail strip from the foundation. He had sold it 3 years later and used the proceeds to build something larger. He had done this 11 times. He was now in the middle of his 12th. He drove a black pickup with a dented rear quarter panel he had not repaired because it did not affect the truck's function. He kept a worn leather-bound project ledger in the passenger seat, one for each development numbered on the spine, the first page a photograph of the site before anything was built, and the last page a photograph of the completed lobby floor. He had 11 complete ledgers in his home office and the 12th open on his desk. He was the kind of man who knew that the work you put into the foundation determined everything that came after, and who had never been persuaded that this applied only to buildings. He had been invited to his own preview reception by his event coordinator, who had organized the evening without understanding that an invitation to the developer of the building was not an invitation to someone who needed directions to it. He had come from the Meridian Industrial Park site, which had consumed his afternoon. He had arrived at the service entrance on the east side of the building, the one he had approved the placement of specifically to allow for loading access without interrupting the lobby footprint. He came in through the service corridor, through the back of house, and into the lobby from the north. The lobby was full. There were 60 or 70 people, commercial brokers, prospective tenants, a few investors, the event staff. The limestone floor he had laid with his own hands 6 days ago was polished and lit and doing exactly what he had designed it to do, anchoring the space, making the room feel proportional, earning its keep. He was 3 steps into the lobby when he heard the laughter. It came from a cluster of 4 near the east wall, brokers. He could tell from the way they stood and held their glasses and oriented themselves to the room. A woman at the center of the group in a good jacket, early 40s, with the specific ease of someone who had been in enough rooms like this one to believe she knew their grammar. She looked at Raymond the way someone looked when they had made an assessment and were sharing it. She said something to the group. He caught the last 3 words. Wrong Bill Group laughed. Not loudly, socially. The laugh of people who had found a moment of consensus in a room full of strangers. He heard every note of it. He did not stop. He did not look at them. He walked across the lobby floor, across his floor, the one he had set on his knees in construction dust 6 days ago, and found his event coordinator near the podium. "Ready?" she said. "Yes," he said. He set his hands on the edge of the podium and looked at the room. 16 years before that Wednesday, Raymond Ashe had done something that had taken 3 weeks and that he had not mentioned to anyone except the 2 people who were there. His first development, the 4-unit retail strip, the one he had built with his business partner from a piece of commercial land he had bought with. Money saved from 6 years of contracting work had run into a flooring problem in the final week before the first tenant's move-in. The flooring subcontractor had installed the finished surface over a subfloor that had not been properly leveled. The problem was invisible to the eye at the time of installation. It revealed itself 3 days before move-in, when the first tenant walked the space and felt the variation underfoot. Raymond had pulled the finished surface himself. He had releveled the subfloor. He had reinstalled the finished surface. It had taken 8 days and cost him $12,000 out of the development budget, and he had absorbed it without discussion because it was his project and it was not right, and the only acceptable response to a floor that was not right was to do the floor correctly. The first tenant had moved in on schedule. She had run a tailoring business out of that unit for 7 years before expanding to a larger space. She had told him once at a development event years later that the floor of that first unit had been the most level floor she had ever worked on and that it had mattered to her more than she expected. She had said that working on a level floor felt like the space was taking the work seriously. He had thought about that for a long time. There was a woman named Vera Ingram, 65, retired from 30 years in commercial property management, who had managed 2 of Raymond's earlier developments, and who was on the advisory board of his current company, who had said to him once, in a review meeting, in her deliberate, precise way, "You know what I've figured out about you? You care the same about the 4th floor of a building nobody walks through as you do about the lobby. Most developers don't. You've never once let me catch you pretending otherwise." He had noted that. He filed it with everything that told him what was actually true about the work. He had noticed in the 6 weeks before the preview reception a particular pattern in the inquiries coming into his development company's leasing office. A commercial brokerage had been presenting itself to prospective tenants as the primary broker of record for the building. The firm with the exclusive right to arrange leases in the development. No such agreement existed. He had not signed an exclusive with any broker. He was running an open listing, which was standard for a building of this type. The brokerage had been making representations it had no authority to make, and prospective tenants were making decisions, including prepaying referral fees, based on those representations. He had learned about this 3 weeks before the event through a prospective tenant who had called the leasing office to confirm the arrangement and been confused by the response. He had called Vera. She had said, "Give me a week." She had needed 4 days. Her name was Vera Ingram. She was 65 years old, small and straight-backed. With silver hair, she wore short and reading glasses she kept on her desk rather than on a chain, because she had never found the chain convenient. She had spent 30 years in commercial property management, knowing where the documentation was in any situation because she had been the person building the documentation for 30 years. She met Raymond at his office on the Monday before the Wednesday event. She had a folder. "I'm going to walk you through what I found," she said, "in the order I found it. Let me finish." The first document was a lease referral agreement, a standard industry instrument that the brokerage had been presenting to prospective tenants as evidence of their exclusive arrangement with the development. The document cited the development's address, Raymond's development company by name, and described an exclusivity arrangement. It was signed by a representative of the brokerage. It was not signed by Raymond or by anyone authorized to sign on behalf of the development. "They created a document that looks like a bilateral agreement," Vera said, "and have been using it in prospective tenant discussions as if it were executed. 5 prospective tenants have been shown this document. 2 of them have paid referral deposits to the brokerage based on the representation that this agreement exists." Raymond looked at the document. He read it with the specific attention he gave to any document that governed a material aspect of a project, methodically, looking for what was accurate and what was not. The brokerage principal, Vera said, is Carla Simmons. He placed the document flat on the desk. He looked at Vera. The second matter, she said, setting the next document on the table, is the referral deposits. 2 prospective tenants paid a total of $1,400 to the brokerage as a precondition of accessing lease terms at this building. There are no lease terms from this building that require a referral deposit. The tenants were told this was standard practice for exclusive listing developments. He read the deposit receipts. He read the correspondence between the brokerage and the 2 tenants. He read the specific language the brokerage representative had used to describe the arrangement. He stood up. He went to the window of his office. Through it, he could see the development, the exterior, the signage, the service entrance he had come through on Wednesday evening. He looked at the building he had been building for 3 years. He stood there for the length of time it took to understand the full shape of what he was looking at. Then he came back. He sat down. He looked at Vera. The 2 tenants, he said. I want to make sure they're made whole before anything else. I thought you would, Vera said. She had a 3rd document ready. I've drafted the letters. He read the letters. He made 2 notes in the margins. He handed them back. Schedule a meeting with Simmons, he said, at the leasing office. Tell her I want to discuss the listing arrangement for the building. Don't tell her anything else. Vera nodded. She made a note. And Vera, he said, I want the full file at the meeting. It'll be there, she said. He didn't move fast. That was how he had always worked. He spent the 3 days between Vera's briefing and the preview event on the floor of the lobby with a flooring crew, finishing the installation the subcontractor had left incomplete. He had been on his knees with a tile saw and a chalk line and a bucket of setting compound for 14 hours across 2 days. He had done this before, many times, on earlier projects, when a detail needed to be right and the person responsible for the detail wasn't getting it right. He did not think of it as unusual. It was just the work. The preview event on Wednesday was the one where Carla Simmons had laughed. After the event, after he had introduced himself from the podium and watched the room recalibrate in real time, watching Carla Simmons's expression go through 5 specific adjustments in the space of about 4 seconds, from social amusement to professional attention to something that looked very much like a person understanding exactly what they had done. He had gone back to the site and stood in the empty lobby for a few minutes. The staff were cleaning up. The guests had gone. The limestone floor held the last of the event lighting. He had done a good job on that floor. He had stood there for a few minutes. Then he had driven home. The meeting with Carla Simmons was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 10 a.m. On Saturday, he had called the 2 prospective tenants personally. He had explained that no exclusive listing arrangement existed, that the representation they had received was not authorized, and that their referral deposits would be returned in full with a letter of apology from his company. He had not mentioned Carla Simmons by name. He had simply explained the situation, taken responsibility for the confusion occurring in connection with his development, and made them whole. Both calls had taken under 20 minutes. On Sunday, he had gone to the Meridian Industrial Site and walked it for 2 hours. He didn't move fast. He never had. He understood, from 18 years of building things, that speed and thoroughness were not the same quality, and that the projects that failed were almost always the ones where someone had confused the two. The leasing office was on the 2nd floor of the development, not yet formally occupied, still carrying the faint smell of fresh paint and new carpet. Raymond arrived at 9:30. He set the project ledger on the desk, the 12th one, still open, not yet complete, and opened the file Vera had prepared. He went through it once more. He closed it. Vera arrived at 9:45 and sat to his left without speaking. She set her reading glasses on the desk in front of her. She opened her own folder. The room was quiet in the way that rooms were quiet before the day's main event. Carla Simmons arrived at 10:03. She was composed and professional, carrying a portfolio that contained, Raymond was certain from the shape of it, a version of the listing proposal she had been positioning herself to deliver. She came through the door with the ease of someone who had done many meetings in many offices and was prepared for this one. She saw Raymond at the desk. A brief recognition, the man from the lobby Wednesday, the man from the podium, the developer of the building she was sitting inside. She adjusted her entry by a quarter step. She sat down across the desk. She set her portfolio in front of her. "Thank you for making time," she said. "Of course," Raymond said. "Before we discuss the listing arrangement, there are a few things I want to put on the table." He opened the file. He placed the fabricated exclusivity document first. He set it flat so she could read it from across the desk. He read the relevant section aloud. The development's name, the exclusivity representation, the brokerage's signature. "This document was prepared by your firm," he said. "It represents an agreement that was never executed. It was presented to 5 prospective tenants as if it were a valid bilateral arrangement." He placed the deposit receipts beside it. 2 of those tenants paid a combined $14,200 in referral deposits based on that representation. Those deposits have been refunded in full by my company. The tenants have been advised of the actual situation. He placed Vera's full correspondence record on the table. Dated, complete. "I want you to understand specifically what I know," he said, "and that it is documented." Carla Simmons looked at the documents. She was composed in the way that people were composed when the composure was the only available resource and they were using all of it. Her attorney, she said, would need to review. "Of course," Raymond said. "I'll expect a response within 10 business days. My attorney has the same file." He looked at her steadily. He had been thinking about what to say at this moment since Wednesday evening. He had not written it down. He had wanted it to arrive the way things arrived when they were simply true. "At the preview event Wednesday," he said, "you made an assessment of me from across the lobby. I heard it." He said it without weight, without theater, just as the record. "I installed the floor you were standing on that evening. I have been building this project for 3 years. These boots," he set one foot briefly, specifically on the floor under the desk, "are the same ones I wore when I broke ground." He looked at her. "I didn't change them for the event because I didn't think I needed to." He paused. "You came to this building to represent it," he said. "I'd have preferred you knew it first." He closed the file. He stood. He picked up the project ledger. He shook Vera's hand. He walked to the door. He stopped. He turned back once. "The floor in this office," he said, "is the same installation as the lobby. I did this one myself, too." He looked at it. The pale limestone, the inlaid border, exactly level, exactly as designed. "I hope it holds up under the use." He walked out. It did not happen all at once. The legal matter resolved in the 7th week. The firm returned the portion of the referral deposits Raymond's company had not already covered, acknowledged the unauthorized representation in writing, and agreed to a corrective statement to the 5 prospective tenants who had been shown the fabricated document. No filing was made with the licensing board. Raymond had not sought that outcome. He had sought the accurate record, which was different. The development's leasing reached 83% occupancy by the spring, including 2 of the tenants who had originally been misled and who, once they understood the actual terms, had leased directly through the development company's leasing office. The first tenant, a restaurant group, opened on a Saturday in March. Raymond walked the space on the Friday before, the way he walked every space on the day before it became someone else's. He looked at the floor. He looked at the proportions of the room. He stood in the center and turned slowly, as he had done on 42 projects, and verified that the work was what it was supposed to be. It was. Vera sent him something through the mail 15 months after the Tuesday meeting, no note. A small plant in a simple ceramic pot, unhurried-looking, the kind that grew without asking for much and had a reputation for outlasting the other things on the shelf. He set it on the windowsill of his project office, beside the row of 11 completed ledgers and the 12th, now finished, on the end. He watered it on Thursdays. He broke ground on the 13th project in February, a mixed-use development on a site he had been watching for 4 years, commercial ground floor, professional offices above, a courtyard between the 2 wings that the site's geometry had made possible, and that he had spent 2 years figuring out how to use correctly. He had been thinking about the courtyard longer than he had been thinking about anything else on the project. He was there when the excavators arrived. He was there when the foundation crew arrived. He was there in the same boots when the floor was poured. On a clear morning in late March, Raymond Ash stood at the edge of the excavation on the new site at 6:04 in the morning, before anyone else arrived, and looked at the ground that was about to become something. He opened the 13th ledger to the first page. He took a photograph of the site. He looked at it for a moment, just the land, unbuilt, the specific quality of a site before the work began, when everything was still possible and nothing had yet been committed to. He had loved this moment since his first project. The moment before the build was the clearest view of what the build was for. He closed the ledger. He heard the first truck turn into the access road. He put on his hard hat. He picked up the ledger. He walked toward the work. His name would be on the floor when this building was finished. His name had been on every floor he had built for 18 years. In the morning and every morning after, the foundation would be poured correctly. He would make sure of it. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.